Hey, deserving listeners. So we just celebrated our 17-year anniversary by having a 10-hour live stream on YouTube, Berto and I. The past few years, that's what we've been doing, is sort of a marathon live stream on YouTube. And in preparation for that live stream, I sent out a survey to all the patrons and the YouTube members and asked them to submit short questions and also more serious questions. I had one question. It's like, what's a short, fun question that you have for us, and what's a serious question? And before live streaming, I identified a set of questions that I thought were suitable, that would be good for the live stream. But we only got to about half of those questions, and that was even just a small representation of all the questions that were submitted. And so I thought I would answer those questions as best as I can and as fast as I can today. So let's get to the patron member questions now. All right, this first question is from patron Fish Our Friends. I have seen their name around. They say, what is your favorite cuisine to cook? Well, my answer to that is I don't cook at all. I'm terrible at it. I don't know. It's just one of those things I've just never, I want to. I have asked, I watch a lot of YouTube videos where they make food. I feel like I have a lot of knowledge in my head, but I've never actually done it, which I'm sure is, a lot more complicated than what's in my head. I seem to watch a lot of YouTube videos where they make baguettes because I love baguettes, and I feel like I could make a baguette, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, but the one thing I do cook is spam musubi, and I have a special Seattle Kirk version of it that I use a different nori. I don't use the I use furikake. I use cream cheese, which for some people might gross people out, but that's kind of a Seattle thing. Like we have Seattle dogs and Seattle rolls that have cream cheese. I don't know where that came from exactly, but it's wonderful. I love cream cheese, and you add just a little bit to spam musubi, or a little bit to a hot dog, or a little bit to a tuna roll, and my goodness, it takes it above and beyond. I also use a particular kind of barbecue sauce, and I like a particular kind of spam, and I like to cook the spam in a particular way. Anyway, I also like the ratio to be very specific. I find a lot of spam musubi has too much rice, too much gohan, and so I like the ratio to be just right. It's it's a complicated process. So I only cook one thing, and I take it very seriously, as you can tell. The next part of the question, patron Fish Our Friend says, what is your favorite food to eat? Like favorite cuisine, favorite sort of type. And I will say that Stacy and I, we gravitate toward Mexican and Italian and pizza, whatever, I guess you could say that's Italian. But yeah, so that's mainly what I eat. Burgers and fries and pizza and nachos and tacos and quesadillas and, just super healthy stuff that you can eat every day and not have to worry about it. Sarcasm. Let's go on to more questions. All right, this next question that I didn't get to in the live stream is from patron Kim. She asks, why do people with disorganized attachment have a tendency to self-sabotage? End of question. Well, it's complicated, and for the sake of time, if I'm going to do a speed round on these questions, I will just say that there are a number of different mechanisms and distortions and pitfalls for people with disorganized attachment. One of which is that for some people with disorganized attachment, they expect things to go poorly in relationships and in life. And sometimes when you just know bad things are going to happen, even though they're not, but the belief is there, then it can sometimes feel less harmful to the self if you can control when that downfall happens, and you can kind of get the self-satisfaction that you at least had some agency in when and how the problem occurred. So that's just one, but there are other reasons. Let's go on to another question. All right, this next question is from Lovely Little Goblin. She asks, basically, I'll summarize the question. Do I have any recommendations regarding other mental health podcasts? And I will answer the question that there are a lot of really great psychology podcasts and YouTube channels these days, a lot more than there were even just 5-6 years ago. And I don't have any specific recommendations, but I would just go out there and start listening and see which podcasts and YouTube channels are up your alley. Because, what I found, it's sort of weird, actually. I don't know if I want to get into this, and for the sake of time, I'll just be brief. That I find that people that listen to my podcast or watch my YouTube channel will sometimes dog on other YouTube channels or podcasts. They'll be like, "Oh, I like your stuff." They'll name some other YouTube channel and they'll say like, "I don't like him," DDD. And I feel like and it's fine, preferences, but I feel like in mental health, for whatever reason, there's kind of a sense of competition, and if you like one, then you hate all the other ones or something. And I think it's a product of that's very similar to seeking therapy, that when you go to 5 therapists, there's typically one that really clicks with you, and the other ones, often there's not a good second place. Often, if you go to 5 therapists, there's one that's a clear first place, and the rest of them are a distant second. And I think that has to do with just how specific psychology and psychotherapy and the philosophy of life is. And it's akin to choosing a partner or a best friend or a mentor or something that results in people really liking the people that they like and really disliking everyone else. And I think that happens to content providers, because I feel like with other types of content, the ones that I watch a lot of guitar content providers and guitar repair. I don't repair guitars, but I just find it kind of fascinating when they're repairing this old Martin or something. And there's a lot of them, and I appreciate them all for their different styles, But there's something about mental health that causes people to really like one content provider and really hate the other. So I would encourage some open-mindedness around that. But, you like what you like and you don't like what you don't like. All right, this next question is kind of fun. Anonymous, he says, if a method came out today that extended your life another 200 years, it was affordable, common, safe, and with little to no side effects, would you take it? Also, you will just age slower or remain the same age you are for an extended period of time. Okay, so the grammar on that is a little, but I think I understand. Would I take it? Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the biggest disappointments of life, really, and the universe, that we have limited time. And I acknowledge it. Some might say I acknowledge death too often. I think about the end frequently, maybe once a day, maybe 3 times a week or something. But I have it formalized in my life. I actually have these rocks that represent months. And in one vessel, I have what, in all likelihood, is the number of months I have left on this planet. And in the other vessel is the number of months that have passed since I was born. And you can visually see, because, I'm 54 and I'll likely be dead in my late 70s, but, give or take 10 years. I don't know, give or take 20 years, who knows. But I have only about a third of my life left, and it sucks. So would I take 200 years? Absolutely. If it was affordable, common, and safe with little to no side effects, yeah, absolutely. And then you say, would I just age slower, or would I remain the same age? At least, well, I don't know. Well, yeah, obviously I'd remain the same age. I wouldn't want turning I don't know about everyone, but a lot of people around me are experiencing the same thing that are my age, that Late 40s, early 50s is when you just go off the deep end. Your health, it just, when I was in my late 40s, I felt pretty much the same as I did when I was in my 20s. The way that my body functioned, even my eyesight. But at 50, it sort of coincided with the pandemic, which makes you wonder about that. But my body started to seriously deteriorate even before. There were markers. And energy level, sleep, mood, digestion, metabolism, muscles, aches, pain. Everyone around me has major changes, and it's just getting fucking worse. So, yeah, if I lived another 200 years, I would at least like it to stay as it is now, because it would just get worse over time. All right, patron Marina from God knows where, she asked a question that I'll summarize about her mother. She was saying that her mom was traumatized growing up, and as a result, her mom is angry and hurtful today, having anger outbursts at Marina, and she's saying, "What do I do with my mother?" And yeah, I don't know. I mean, the easy answer that you'll get on the internet is draw a boundary and move on with your life, but that ignores the reality of attachments and of our needs and of our lives. So it's complicated is the thing. Yeah, obviously you are in the right to draw boundaries, but it just depends on the pros and the cons. In all likelihood, if she did raise you with these angry outbursts at you, you probably have a skewed sense of what is fair to you, and so you probably need to artificially create a sense of fairness that that would help motivate you to protect yourself more often. Now, that doesn't mean you're rejecting her outright, but it might. All right, this next question is from patron Charles Xavier. He says, what are some things you had to unlearn in grad school in order to be a better therapist, and what are some books you recommend? Well, that's a good question. Well, one of the biggest things I had to unlearn, and I can very much remember this 30 years ago, that I thought therapists told people what to do or were kind of judgmental. I had this vision that therapists were kind of like wise know-it-alls, and that stereotype persists today. I think less so, but it still is around. I see tropes in TV and movies, and there are therapists that do this as well. So it was sort of a superiority thing. And the reason why I know that I had this stereotype was in the months lead, I decided to be a therapist in like February of 1995, and I was in graduate school by that October 1 kind of a thing. And in the interim months there from February to October, I thought of myself as a grad student, as a therapist in training, but I hadn't taken any classes yet. And I was just a former jock and a grunge band member and a frat guy. And so and I'd been in therapy briefly, but I really just had no idea what therapy really was. It's kind of a miracle that I actually liked being a therapist, because it's just one of those things that you don't know until you try. But a lot of my classmates, including Bob, who I met that October, had a lot more experience, not only being in therapy themselves more than I had, but also working in mental health adjacent fields like Bob. And so I was really unknowledgeable, and I knew it too. I day one, I just looked around the class as people were introducing themselves, and I thought, my God, everyone has a leg up on me. We had a module on empathy, And that was the topic. Like, okay, so you read about empathy this last week, and now we're going to talk about it. And it was a brand new word to me. Now, in today's world, that wouldn't likely happen, but back in the mid-90s, that was not a word that was commonly used, at least in my circle. And so I remember thinking, oh, empathy, oh, interesting. And everyone else in the class knew what it was. And I'm just like, my God, what am I doing? But one of the things I really had to unlearn was this notion that therapists were superior know-it-alls. But that went away instantly. Oh, the reason why I know that I had this stereotype was there's a video. So I've always loved videotaping things for posterity. I don't know why, but as a teenager, I've been journaling since I was 13, and a good reason why I journal is because I suspected that when I was older, I would be curious about what I was thinking at the time and what I was doing. And I also suspected that I could learn and it would help me to see the progression or to see patterns or whatever, and it doesn't take long to just jot something down or take a picture or take a video. And in the 90s, no one had video cameras. It was too expensive or too unwieldy. And so, I say nobody, meaning I didn't know a single person, and I knew a lot, being in a frat and, growing up in Seattle, I knew a lot of people. I didn't know a single person who had a video camera except for me. And the only reason why I had one is because my dad bought a new one, and I just asked to take his old one. And it was one of those giant video cameras that hooked up to a VCR, and you had to carry around the VCR with you. Anyway, and so the only place I could record was in my room because the battery was dead, so I had to have the VCR plugged in, Anyway, but there's this video where I'm having a house party. My house was by Green Lake, if you're familiar. That house doesn't exist anymore. Now it's a condo. But I was filming myself talking with my friends, people I'm still friends with today, and I'm already clearly trying to act like I'm a therapist, and it's super cringe. And I'm like, on one level, it's just a really interesting video because I'm asking these very personal questions of my friends, and I'm filming it, and they know I'm filming it, and they know I'm not going to put, this is before the internet, so there's nowhere to, anyway, but I still have it. And so anyway, I'm asking these very personal questions that they were kind of used to by that point anyway for me. And but just that my demeanor and the way I'm responding, it's super cringe. Anyway, so I had to unlearn that. But I really worry about current grad students because on one hand, well, I don't know, maybe it's a wash, because on one hand, current new graduate students obviously would have absorbed a lot of psychology and psychotherapy content from the internet and podcasts and everything, right? If they're interested in becoming a therapist, I assume that at least for a while they've been seeking that content out. So on one hand, they're probably way beyond even the students that I thought were beyond me when I started out. On the other hand, most of the stuff on TikTok anyway is complete bullshit. I can't believe just how shitty TikTok is at, I don't know if it's just the algorithms that I see people using, but it is just filled with bullshit information. YouTube as well, and every platform, but there's something about TikTok, there's something about the way that I've been giving this some thought, and I think this might be a factor, who knows, that you can't make money on TikTok, or it's very, very hard. And you can make money on YouTube, though, and you can make money as a podcaster. Well, TikTok is obviously geared towards shorter content, right? And there's also a style of making content on TikTok that is very particular, and I find it really annoying. Like the style of TikTok video is just like, it's like they're making videos for children. The way that they will try to grab your attention is the way that you try to grab like a 7-year-old's attention. with a lot of like, hey, like big eyes and blah, 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 you just real sing-songy voice. It's just like, God damn, just say the thing, And there's just a I don't know. It's just not for me. If it's for you, great. And TikTok is, it's got literally probably billions and billions of videos. So it's in some people's algorithms. I'm sure it's all great, whatever. But my point is that for us clinicians who know what the fuck we're talking about, if I might be so bold to say that about me, we don't go on TikTok because we have to pay our bills, and we're used to being paid for our expertise. And so I have a theory that people because, I experimented with YouTube or with TikTok. I really gave it a shot. I mean, I poured a lot of time and energy into it, and it was kind of fun for a while. And to this day, my most viewed video was a TikTok video. It had millions of views. But then I'd look at the comment section. I'd be like, oh my God, these people they're so misinformed. Or I don't even understand. Yeah. Whereas YouTube comments, I understand usually, but on TikTok, I'm like, what are they saying? Anyway, so I have a theory that TikTok will skew towards people that aren't used to getting paid for their expertise, meaning they don't have expertise. And whereas people who have expertise are more likely to go to YouTube and to podcasting or something else, right? I don't know. This is old man shakes fist at TikTok. But anyway, then so I worry about new students. And when I was teaching more regularly a few years ago, I started seeing this problem that I had to deprogram students. And it was hard because they had been absorbing notions about narcissism or autism or ADHD or what else? Maybe borderline, complex PTSD, limerence. There were just all these hot topics that you see on the internet that are just complete misinformation. And I would have to dismantle that. And it was hard, because once it's in there, it's in there. Anyway. But then on the other hand, when I think about it, it's like, well, the students that I had 20 years ago had nothing to turn to. And so they were like completely just ignorant of everything. But somehow I'd rather have that. Anyway, but then you ask me a book I recommend. Well, along the lines of early graduate school, one of my favorite books that I assign or recommend is called Between Therapist and Client by Michael Kahn. It's a real easy read. It's it doesn't read like a textbook, but it's a psychodynamic, humanistic, integrative thing, but it's really good. All right, let's take a break. All right, back from the break. Duchesne says, if there was one fundamental law of reality you could change, what would it be and why? And my answer to that is aging. And then next question. Duchesne asked another question. I'll summarize. He's basically asking about spirituality and therapy and personality development. It sounds like he's a graduate student as a counselor, and he is wanting to specialize in personality disorders, and he knows that a lot of things contribute to one's personality, and he's observing that there's not a lot of talk about religion and spirituality in graduate school or in our field, and wanting to find information on that. And what I would say is, you kind of have to seek it out. I don't have any recommendations, unfortunately. I mean, there are books out there that I remember reading, but none of them really kind of hit the mark. The thing that I would say is that being a good therapist for clients requires absorbing a lot of human experience that you cannot read in a textbook. So to become a competent counselor with clients regarding religion and spirituality, you might just want to ask people about their spirituality and their religion, or think about your own, or read books, memoirs about people that grew up in certain religions, or you just want to absorb that. And you want to have a well-rounded input set, meaning that you don't want to read just memoirs of people who grew up Catholic and hate Catholicism. But that's my advice, is that you're wise to observe that there's a gap and it's a problem. And I would, as a professor and as program director, I would try to change this. And I actually had a professor that I hired who was out about her religion, that she was a Christian, because not only most clients that my students would encounter would be some version of Christianity, but also because Christianity in graduate school and in colleges is often considered an evil force. And yeah, it can be evil, but it isn't usually. And it, at the very least, it's a part of human life. And we have to talk about, for a lot of our clients, it is the major aspect of their life that they frame meaning, reality, relationships, death, life, marriage, parenting. Everything is framed through that. And that's neither a good thing or a bad thing. It's a thing, and you just have to consider it. Now, you don't have to talk overtly with clients about it, but you can, and I always do. I always will ask about it, particularly in the beginning, not only as a way of just showing clients that we can talk about that, because a lot of clients don't think they can, especially in more atheistic communities like Seattle. So it's an invitation and a tone setting, but also I'm curious because it plays a role, like one of the major roles that it plays is when they are grieving the death of a loved one or a pet. I will ask, do you believe in an afterlife? You might even hear me asking that when I'm talking with people on the podcast. I think I asked Bob about that, because that changes everything, does it not? and so I will ask. And to not ask, I just don't understand. There's a taboo or worry, or I don't know. It's weird that yeah. Anyway, next question. Actually, before getting to the next question, some of you may have submitted questions that you wanted answered, but you didn't get a chance to see the live stream, and you didn't get a chance to see the recording of the live stream. And what I'll say is that, and some patrons were wanting access to the live stream because, well, let me just start from the beginning. One, I like these live shows because they're live. I don't think that they're very good content, though. I'm kind of a stickler for making sure that the content that we publish and that we keep up, because I take down episodes occasionally, not in the past, 5 or 7 years, but a lot of the episodes that I published 10, 15 years ago, I have removed from the feeds because I don't think that they're very good. And so I am a bit of a stickler for that. And the live shows are not good content in that way. They're fun, right? But I don't want to have that kind of that kind of content in the catalog. I worry that people will come upon the podcast for the first time, and that's the first thing they see for whatever reason, and I don't want that to happen. So also, I just have I don't know, a principle that these live shows are live for a reason, right? Because we could pre-record them if we wanted to, edit it, make, clean it up, and then publish it, right? And it would be a better episode. But the whole point is that it's live, that it's improv, and that people are there with us. We're having conversations with people during the live stream. And I know it's hard, right? Because it's on a particular day and people work and, you got things to do. And that's why I keep it up for everyone after, for a couple days. But then I switched it over to members only, and that sucks for patrons, but there's really no way to do it other than that. And I really only switched it over to members because I just randomly thought of it a couple of days later, and I didn't have the heart to I wanted to take it down. I mean, if I had it my way, there wouldn't be a recording. You would have to be there or not. And, it's like people are like, well, we want to see it. And I get it, but some things are transient. Some things are meant to exist and then be gone. And I think that's one of them. Plus, it's a little embarrassing, honestly, because, especially by hour 8, my brain starts to go. And I don't know, it's just, that's my thing. So if you submitted a question and you didn't get a chance to see it, and you didn't get a chance to see the recording, and you're bummed out that you're not going to hear me answer your question in these episodes, because I'm guessing it'll take more than one episode for me to go through all these, I apologize. You feel free to resubmit your question via the website, but that's just kind of the way it's got to be. All right, this next question from Pandalina. She says, have you considered commenting or reacting to Love is Blind Japan? It would be interesting given your background. Yeah, I have, and I've seen bits and pieces because Stacy watched it. I don't know how many seasons there are, but I would love to, believe me. There are so many shows that I would love to watch and create content around. I would love to get back into Welcome to Plathville. I would like to revisit Vanderpump Rules. I don't even they even have that show anymore. The Golden Bachelor. There's countless 90 Day Fiance seasons that I haven't watched at all. All the Love is Blinds, Brazil, and I think there's one in Sweden. There was also that other show, Married at First Sight. That was really interesting and had some real interesting provocations for me to say things. But I, over the years, have discovered that I have to be very disciplined about what I commit to, because I want to commit to it. But if I commit to it, my life and my health and my work and everything will start going down the tubes. So I have to create, it's sort of like a New Year's resolution of just like, okay, I'm only gonna, I'm not gonna eat nachos for the rest of the year or something, and it's that, I want to have nachos, but there are consequences. And so for me, by the way, I didn't make a resolution like that. That'd be impossible for me. But so I have to say that I'm only going to watch Love is Blind US and occasional 90 Day Fiance seasons. Like right now I'm watching Last Resort Season 2, which is really interesting because these are couples that I know pretty well because they've been on many seasons before. And so we're seeing a progression. We're not watching the kind of fluff 90 Day Fiance content where they're just talking over Zoom or something. These are real married or, very involved couples that are having real issues, and they're presumably in therapy at this resort for 3 weeks. And I can comment on how bad or good the therapy is. So that is a fun thing. So I'm going to watch. So that's the plan. And what that means is that I'm still working like on average 60 hours a week, but I'm not working 85 hours a week, which is what I was doing before. So I'm sorry about that. Patron Allie asks, can you tell us about your skincare routine? Kirk, are there any Japanese products you like to use? End of question. Well, I don't have a skincare routine. A lot of my skin is just genetically the way that it is. Yeah, I don't even I don't even wash my face really because I'm so impatient. I hate doing things that feel like I'm wasting time. And so many years ago, I just developed this system of showering where I will, put the shampoo in my hand and then I wash my hair, and then the soap from the shampoo just kind of works its way on the rest of my body, and I'll get under my armpits and my crotch, and then I rinse, and I'm literally done in like 25 seconds with a shower. That's how long it takes. Because I just like, I want to do. There's so many things I want to do. There's so many TV shows I want to react to. So many questions on that survey. And, I mean, literally. So there's a chance I haven't washed my face in months. It just, now, if I got dirty, like if I don't know, was in the yard or something and got some on my face, then I suppose maybe, I don't know. I don't know. When I said that, I'm like, would I actually? I don't know. But when you're all lathered up, like stuff happens to your face anyway. But I will say that my skin, I think, isn't as youthful or clear as it used to be. I'm starting to get these like, what do you call them? Like liver spots? Is that the proper term? And other kinds of anomalies all over my body, including my face. So but Japanese products, no, I don't. My wife is a skincare professional. That's what she did for a good number of years. Like when her modeling gigs started to kind of slow down, then she became a skincare esthetician, and she was like high end. She did all the fancy goos, and she had like 5 ways of electrocuting people. You wouldn't think that facials involved electrocution of the clients, but there's a lot of ways, and they did this like electrocution thing on muscles to work the muscles out. I don't know how that relates to facial, but she was trained in that. And there was like this pod of ultraviolet or of infrared radiation, and there were these little these ways of electrocuting your face. So it like, I don't know, it like zaps. Maybe it kills the germs, or it helps the pores, or I don't know. She's got all the stuff, but I've probably had 3 to 5 facials from her in all the time that I've known her, and so I don't think that has anything to do with it. Anyway, let's go on to another question. Anonymous, she says, if you couldn't live in Seattle, what other city in the U.S. would you move to? And my answer to that would be New York City, Manhattan, or Brooklyn. Second choice would be LA. I love LA. People dog on LA, but LA is wonderful for a lot of reasons, and the people are great. I found the people in LA and New York, honestly, to be really cool. I find people in Seattle to be really cool. Anyway, if you couldn't live in the U.S., what country would you move to? I would move to London. I loved London. I thought London was amazing. I thought it was like New York, but even more metropolitan, more international, cleaner, nicer people, maybe not as much interesting things to do. Like New York just has so many things to do. I mean, Stacy and I were walking down the street, and I hear music. I love just dipping into music venues. And we dip into this bar, and there's just like 3 people at the bar. It's this tiny, one of those downstairs Manhattan bars. And in the back, there's this, I don't even know, was it a Brazilian? I don't know what it was, but it was sort of salsa. I don't know. It reminded me of Astrid Ilberto, the girlfriend, Ipanema, but it was all in Portuguese or Spanish, or Italian. I don't know what it was. But I love music, and I love listening to music, and we got, there was no one there, so we're in the front row. They just had tables. And I'm getting really into it, and the singer started to kind of vibe with me and Stacy, and then, we're having more drinks, and in between the songs we're, kind of vibing. And then she pulled me on stage, and Stacy, and we were like with the band dancing, and I don't know, it was just shit like that. In New York, it's everywhere. Now Seattle has that too. Like actually, a friend of mine, actually the drummer of my band when I was in high school and college, he was in town, and so he always loves to go out to all the different clubs in Seattle. And so we were doing that, and we saw some really great bands. And there's this zone where we could kind of bounce from different places. And now that we have money, we can afford the $5 cover charge of 5 different venues and not feel bad about it. And I always nerd out with the musicians. These small venues, these musicians, they aren't getting a lot of love from the audience because there's not a lot of people in the audience. And so I like to kind of praise them because I love what they're doing. And there's so many interesting musicians out there, and their stories and their methods and their gear and their whole oeuvre. I love it. And so after they're done playing, I'm like asking them questions, and I always find that they're always really glad to talk with someone in the audience. Like, oh, someone appreciates what I'm doing. And I'm also gearing up for my own music YouTube channel, and I have big plans and big dreams, and one of them is I want to play with a lot of musicians, and I want to have like a stable of drummers and bassists. I know a lot of guitarists, so I don't really need that. And singers, I actually, another part of getting older is I feel like my voice is changing in ways that I'm not happy about. Although maybe it's just I'm out of practice. But anyway, so when I meet these musicians, I'm just like, hey, can I get your number? Because I'd love to call you. And so I don't know. I found New York to just have that. Every corner had stuff like that. But London is great too. I thought London was fantastic, and speaking English and stuff. And I found London to actually have good food. People make fun of English food, but London not only had good English food like fish and chips, like really high end fish and chips, really grubbing fish and chips and a pint. But also, it's an international city, so they got some of the best Indian food there. Pakistani, they got Mexican food there. They got everything. And I just loved London. Anyway, let's take a break. All right. Anonymous, she asks another question that is pretty interesting. I'm just going to read it here. I'm the type of person who loves to get to know someone completely. So I have always asked people I'm developing relationships with a bunch of questions about themselves and their lives. But I recently started therapy and have wondered if it's appropriate to have a back and forth conversation with my therapist about their lives. Up until now, it's felt awkward to me at times that I'm asking about her, only at the beginning parts of our sessions when I'm talking about how was your week, etc. It's awkward for me to not be like, oh, how was your week? Did your kids start school yet? Because I'm unsure if it's looked down upon for therapists to share their lives. So should I ask her if those types of things are inappropriate, or am I overthinking it and basic life questions aren't usually a big deal for a therapist to share? End of question. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever been asked this question, and it's really interesting. And what I'll say is that it's complex, but generally speaking, as a client, you're free to do what you want to do. It's in the hands of the therapist to figure out how to manage that. And so if that's what makes you feel comfortable, or you're even just curious about the therapist, then it's fine. And there's nothing, quote unquote, inappropriate about that. You might find people saying it's inappropriate to ask your therapist about their lives, but it's a client, within a certain range, and this is definitely within that range. Clients can do whatever they want, and there's nothing appropriate or inappropriate. And I'm not even a fan of that word usually. So if that's what makes you feel comfortable, fine. And you can ask, is it bad that I'm doing this, or does it bother you that I'm asking you these questions? Because I do that because that's just how I am, or this is what makes me feel comfortable. Or I'm just curious about you, or I care about you, or whatever. You can say all those things. Now, some therapists will refuse to answer those questions outright because they have a style that doesn't self-disclose or doesn't have that kind of freedom to have the therapist self-disclose in that kind of free way. I'm not really putting that in good words, but Other therapists are totally fine answering those questions. Generally speaking, my advice to therapists is to do what is necessary for the benefit of the treatment, meaning that you want to gauge whether or not the client is asking the question and sort of needs that back and forth in order to feel comfortable. If so, then do it. Only self-disclose what you're willing to and be brief. Like I'll just tell my style. I find my style to be a good rule of thumb for people, that when people ask those questions, which is kind of rare actually, because most people, when they sit down to therapy, they're paying a lot of money. They don't want small talk. They're like, let's get into it. We always run out of time, so let's not waste time. But there are some clients that will do that, and I usually will conceptualize them as being like you, where they are used to that. It sort of makes them feel more at ease. There's also something feminist and anti-patriarchy to have a little back and forth there, because it brings me down off of a pedestal. There's a bit of a power play when a therapist doesn't self-disclose, at least kind of. There's debate around that. But anyway, so if I determine that, another aspect of this is some clients will have these questions because they think they're supposed to, and they don't really want to, because they don't understand the social rules of therapy, and they feel like it's rude not to ask me about my week. And if that's the case, then I'll either answer very briefly, or I might even just directly say, you don't have to do that for me. I'm good. If you're genuinely curious, then I suppose we can talk about that. But if you're just asking me how my week is going because you feel like it's rude not to, I'm here to tell you it's not rude at all. You don't ever have to ask me any questions, and I'm not going to consider it rude. and honestly, it's not a typical thing in therapy for us to talk about my week, that kind of thing. But if I thought that it was helpful to the relationship and to the anxiety of the client, then yeah, I'll answer. Like if you asked me, how was your week? I would say, oh, yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, pretty good. I'm doing pretty well. I feel energetic and getting good sleep. How was your week? So I'm answering honestly, but I'm not getting into it, and I'm not distracting the therapy toward whatever happened in my week that was difficult or something specific. I mean, maybe as just a little joke, I might, if something happened, like if I stepped in some dog shit while walking the dog or something, I might mention that and just be like, well, pretty good, aside from stepping in some dog shit this morning, but just a little joke and then move forward. So, yeah. Now, if a client or if a therapist were to answer these questions in detail, or if a therapist were to even get into these kinds of back and forths motivated by themselves, I would say that's not a good idea for a lot of reasons, but let's answer another question. Oh, here's one question that we didn't get to. Morgan M., who is a patron and a YouTube member, she asked, without any caveats or long-windedness, what is one thing you both love dearly about the other person? Yeah, so we did talk about this a little bit in the live stream, but, and I know I'm doing this by myself without Berto, but I will say that I love Berto dearly for a lot of reasons. He is one of the nicest people I've ever met. He is, he's really fun. We share a lot in common. We love having adventures together. With that, we've always just loved adventuring together, and he is always up for anything, and I'm generally always up for anything as well. Like, you put him in any situation, and he always has a good time. He's funny. He's really smart, and he loves me, which, it's like when you rattle off all the things that you love about someone, maybe it's particularly for a guy thing. You talk about all the things that you do together, but the bottom line is that I know that he loves me, and I know that he cares about me, and I know he prefers me. And it's kind of funny because when I first met him 20 years ago ish, I'd be curious as to when exactly. I think it was maybe 19. Anyway, I was not in his inner circle, but I've slowly wormed my way into his inner circle. So yeah. And the way both of our lives have sort of meandered over those 2 decades, for various reasons, our inner circle has shrunk to some extent. And so our relationship is even more concentrated in that way. But anyway, another question. Patron Mary, she asked, do y'all ever get into psychology or mental health of other animals than humans? If so, what have you found to be similar or different to us? End of question. Yeah, I could talk about this for a long time, but for the sake of time and to reflect the fact that I'm not an expert on this, I'll just say that off the podcast, I think about this a lot, not only with my own pets, but just in general. And I have read some research. I had a colleague who actually specialized in psychology of animals, particularly our pets. And it is fascinating to think about what we can relate to, as we observe the behavior of our pets, and also what we delude ourselves into thinking. Like one of the things that I have learned with my big dog is that he likes physical contact, but it has to be in a particular way. And he has his different ways of protesting. I like to cuddle big with him, but he doesn't like to cuddle big. It's threatening, it's overwhelming, it's annoying. And so I have to refrain, or I have to do quick bursts and then pull back or something. And, because most people, like when Stacy and I cuddle or hug or whatever, it's pretty all encompassing, there's no distance. It's, fully engulfing each other, that kind of thing. And I suspect that a lot of dogs, I find maybe particularly bigger dogs don't like that, which makes sense. They probably evolved a different set of affection methods, right? Dogs don't hug full frontal. I mean, I'm sure some do, right? Actually, my little dog does. She likes to have full frontal, like fully splayed kind of. But then you wonder, well, the little dog might just submit to that because she knows she's a little dog and she's not really a growler. So it's interesting and pertains to our relationships with these animals. So yeah, there's so much more I could say about like fear and anxiety and relationships and missing each other. The dogs miss us. Stacy and I will go to dinner and we'll be gone for 2.5 hours. And when we get back, the dogs will be flipping out that we're home. And it's just like, my God, we were just gone for 2.5 hours. But, part of it is that we never leave the house. So they're not really used to it. All right, this next question is from Molly. She asks, what types of volunteer experience would you recommend for someone working while completing their online bachelor's in psychology? And it sounds like their goal is to become a counselor. And, that it's a great question, but I'm not really in that circle anymore, so I don't know all of the things that people are doing. But from my knowledge, I would say that there's not a lot of volunteer or even jobs that are going to help one become a therapist, because being a therapist is so different from all the other jobs. The only jobs that are may be helpful, not only in just gaining some experience, but might bolster your resume or application, would be maybe getting a bachelor level job or even below a bachelor level job at a local agency, mental health agency. They will have jobs like case managers or working with teens with drug and alcohol education or something like that. But honestly, when I would get applications from students, from prospective students, those kind of volunteerships didn't really move the needle for me, but maybe they would for others. Because being a therapist is just so different. There's nothing that I would expect an applicant to have experienced that would tell me that they know what they're doing. We used to actually, actually, there is one thing that is kind of analogous, and that is, I don't know if every jurisdiction has this, but in Seattle we have the crisis line. People will call in the midst of a suicidal attempt, or they're about to attempt, or they're worried about their mental health or something. And so they'll call this crisis line either to get a referral or just to kind of talk and sort of talk them down. And to volunteer for that, you don't have to be a therapist for that. And, that's pretty close to at least one version of client, right? So maybe that, anyway, another question. All right, a question from Austin. He says, what aspect of death scares you the most? End of question. My answer to that is really nothing scares me about death. I mean, I'm not jazzed about being in pain for months or experiencing dementia or being in and out of the hospital with various different procedures and tubes sticking out of me. But I'm not afraid of that. So it's not fear. It's just disappointment. It's like grieving. There's a loss of life for people that have died before I die, and for myself. I'm not afraid. I don't know if this question is directed at me or Berto because we've talked about this specifically before. So maybe this is just kind of a general question. But yeah, I guess if I had to pick like what aspect of death scares me the most, I suppose it would be pretty terrifying to know that one is dying, either in that very moment or will die in the next week or something. I suppose that would be pretty terrifying to... Now, I want to be clear that for me, I am not sure that there is no afterlife, one way or the other, whether it's heaven or the next level of reality or an alien race that, we're in a simulation or reincarnation or just an energy ball that travels the universe, or I don't know. There's no evidence of these things, but there probably wouldn't be if it did exist. And so I'm holding out for that possibility. And there's because I was raised Christian, I have DNA or neuronal connections. I have circuits in my brain that were established that feel as though there will be an afterlife. So I have faith that there's a possibility of that. But there's another rational part of my mind that would say that's ridiculous and that's just wishful thinking. When things die, they just die. Why would it be any other thing, We're collections of molecules and atoms, and there's nothing, there's no ghost in the machine. There's just a machine. And so, I guess in the last bit of time, there's a chance that I'll just die without knowing I'm going to die, right? But if I know I'm going to die, I guess I would hope that my faith or delusional belief in an afterlife would really kick in, and be like, oh, well, this will be a good thing, I'll transform into this other. Anyway, another question. Irene, she says, I'm a pre-licensed psychologist preparing my second attempt at the EPPP. Just chiming in, EPPP is the test you take for licensure in the United States to be a psychologist after you graduate. And it is way harder than the other licensing exams. You know, you have an exam in marriage and family therapy or in counseling or social work, and the psychologist exam is like beyond, so much so that I never took it. I could take it actually now. I'm qualified to take it, but I didn't need to be a licensed psychologist because I was licensed as a marriage and family therapist. And the amount of studying involved for this thing, it's enormous. Like, there are whole sections on the EPPP that aren't covered in graduate school. Like, there apparently is a whole section on industrial organizational psychology, and in my program, they didn't have a class on that. So you essentially have to go back to graduate school, kind of, to like bone up for the EPPP. Anyway, so Irene is preparing, and good for you. I love your content because I often feel it is helpful in a supervisory kind of way. I was wondering if you offer mentorship, supervision, or consultation, or how I might be able to learn more directly from you as a mental health professional. End of question. Yeah, thanks, Irene. I'm flattered that you would want me to play that role in your life. And I, in reference back to my earlier conversation about work-life balance, this was another vow that I had to make, because if I was left to my own devices, I would take on more supervisees and mentees. I love that work. I'm almost done with my book on grief, but I've only published one book, and that was on supervision. And that supervision book is mainly about mentorship and how important it is for supervisors to encapsulate all the 19 roles that I lay out, including being an attachment figure, being someone that the supervisee or mentee feels safe with, right? A big part, most of my, when people think about a professor, as I'm currently, I don't know if I say I'm retired or semi-retired or just taking a break. Officially, I'm just taking a break from teaching, but I plan on teaching again when I have, maybe in the next couple of years or something. I don't know. I want to get back. So but it's been a bit. But anyway, for the time that I did teach at Antioch, people would, I guess if they didn't know better, they would think of me in the front of a class lecturing or something. But there was a bit of that, but most of what I was doing was mentorship and helping people at their internships, helping people post-grad, helping people get jobs, helping people actually do therapy. And so, and that's what a lot of training institutions are like. It's less lecture, more experience. Anyway, let's answer a few more. All right, this next question is sort of coincidental. Anonymous, she says, what's an unprovable belief you engage in just for fun? I believe in reincarnation because it's good for me to believe in. Science shows that people who hold beliefs that make life feel bigger and more meaningful tend to be less anxious and happier. For me, reincarnation turns endings into beginnings and makes those I've lost feel tangible. Even if it's not literally true, the peace it gives me is real, and that's the part that is backed by science. And that's the way my science learning, and that's the way my science leaning brain makes the unsciency thing science. End of question. Yeah, that's great. Well, I feel like I just sort of answered that question. All right, this next question also from Anonymous, and it's a bit long. And so if you're the one that asked that previous question, the second question requires a lot more time, so I would just email that question in if you want that question to be answered. This next question, Caitlin from Canada, she says, how do you cope with the fascism that is descending around us? Yeah, well, what I do, and I'm not recommending that everyone do this. I don't have any clinical advice for the masses on these topics. These are too individual. And I find that when people talk about politics or when they talk about coping, it's assumed that everyone should be doing it this way. And I don't think it's possible to provide general advice for this sort of thing. But I can talk about what I do because, of course, I do have to cope with the fear, the anger, the frustration, the demoralization, the rage. And I cope with it by putting my oxygen mask on first, by making sure that I am doing okay, enough anyway, right? And that can mean that I only absorb so much. Like, one of the things I've been doing lately is on Reddit, a lot of the subreddits that are not political are starting to post political things, probably for good reasons. But when I'm on Reddit, it's usually late at night as I'm about to go to bed, and I can't have that in my head as I fall asleep. And so I've been unsubscribing to a number of subreddits that, like, I think I unsubscribed to Our Pics, Our Pictures, the subreddit, because they were posting more and more political stuff, and I get it, but I also just don't like it. So whatever I have to do to make sure that I am okay, for the most part, is what I do first. What I do beyond that, and this can all happen kind of at the same time. It's not like I need to be okay, and then I'm like, okay, now I'll look at the news. It's all kind of happening at the same time. The other thing that I will do is that I try to put myself in perspective, in that I am just one out of millions and millions of people that are a part of this system, whether it's a political system or an economic system or a societal system. I'm just one person, and I play a role, and maybe a bigger role than others because I have a platform, but I'm just one person. And I have to remind myself that I have power over some of the things that are happening practically around me, but I don't have any practical power over the federal government, right? And so I need to do that for myself, because if I don't remind myself of that, then I will feel more intense emotion that is unnecessary, because I will feel like a failure, or I'll feel like a winner if things are going well, when it's not the reality, right? So that's the other thing. And then I also tell myself that I do play a part, and I need to play my part. And so, it's sort of like littering, right? If I don't litter or do litter in Seattle, will it be noticeable? No, because I'm one of millions of people in the Seattle area. And so it doesn't really ultimately matter on the big picture if I litter or don't litter, and yet I need to not litter, and I feel better if I don't litter. And I feel particularly better if I pick up litter, when I see it. So it's the same thing, right? We have to understand that we're not the center of the universe, and yet understand that we are part of the universe. We're an integral part. So that's the other thing. And then I obviously commit myself to voting. I'm a very dedicated voter, and I find that a lot of very politically active people will vote occasionally, and I find that to be abhorrent. Honestly, it's like, well, what are you doing then? Are you just fucking tweeting all the time? Like, vote, God damn it! That's the point of this thing, and it by voting connects you with the reality of what part you can play. And also, it alerts you to local politics. Most of the things that I vote on don't have to do with things happening in Washington, D.C. I was 99% of the votes that I cast are Seattle things and Washington State things and King County things. Very, very important things. Very important positions, very important propositions and laws that are being passed because in Washington State, we have this system where we get to vote on particular laws and levies and other things. We don't just elect representatives who then vote about these issues. We get things on the ballot ourselves, and researching those things and being passionate about talking about it with friends and family, that kind of thing. Anyway, so that's important for me. And the other thing that I do is that I participate, right? So what does that mean? It's hard, I think I talked about this with the immigration episode with Berto, and the thing that we have to do is we have to take care of ourselves. We have to acknowledge that we have emotions that are based on rational observations of things, like if we're angry or afraid or rageful, demoralized, to cope with that by just denying reality so that we're no longer sad isn't probably going to work, or at the very least isn't helpful to the society. But then we ask ourselves, okay, well, what can I do? And again, that's where the perspective comes in, because if we believe, I think with the immigration episode, I was saying, and I don't know if I pissed a lot of people off. I can only talk about, this is just me. I'm not telling you how you're supposed to do shit. I'm a therapist. I'm not a political scientist. I'm just a lay person when it comes to this sort of thing. So, take that with a grain of salt. That I will tell myself, I do not have the power, this is upsetting, and what do I need to do to protect me and my family if this gets worse, or given how bad it is now? What do I need to do? And I do those things. Then to help change society, I ask myself, okay, what am I feeling? Is it rational? Okay, it is rational. Okay, what do I need to do? What can I do, right? What are the options? Let's lay out the options. I can vote. I can march. I can send letters. I can, stand on the corner with a sign. I can contribute money. There's various different things. I could try to convince other people one way or the other. I could knock on doors. I could volunteer. There are options, right? And then I start figuring out, what can I do? What do I want to do? And how will it affect the big picture, and how will it affect my emotions? And then I enact that plan. And so, and then once I'm enacting that plan, if I have extra feelings, I tell myself, I hear you, self, but I'm doing the thing that I've thought about this a lot, and I'm doing the plan. So any extra feeling, and if I'm getting those extra feelings that aren't helpful because I'm exposing myself throughout the day to various different news stories that aren't helping me at all, right? I'm generally aware of the problem, and I've absorbed the reality, and I have my emotions, and I evaluated my options, and I made a plan, and I'm doing the plan. If during the period of time, say a couple months, where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to expose myself to like every 10 minutes that guy tweets something stupid and fascist. And so if I pay attention to every single one of those things, what good does it do me, and what good does it do the movement? It actually, for me, would harm the movement, because it would put me in a state where I wouldn't have energy to volunteer or talk about this, or I would talk about it in a weird way, or I would dehumanize the other side to such an extent that it would just make things worse, which I have done before. If I don't watch how much I'm absorbing, I will absolutely dehumanize Republicans and MAGA. I will think of them as universally evil, and it's just not the case. And when I go into that, I get it, and I think a lot of people understand, but it doesn't help the movement. It doesn't help change. It doesn't push things forward. It just makes the divide worse. It rots my insides. It gives me incentive to turn away completely. You know what I mean? So there has to be balance and planning and self-awareness and perspective. And that's what I do. I'm not saying that's what you should do. And if you're a Republican or you're a MAGA, then, there's a version of that for you as well, right? This isn't just a liberal thing. So this is what I think everyone should consider doing. I know I said earlier I don't have general advice, but I will say that I find myself less. I don't know if this is true, but I have some friends, and this doesn't include Berto. I'm thinking of some other guys that seemingly are letting it rot their insides to such an extent that they aren't doing anything. They might not even be voting because they've given up or something. And that's what I'm talking about, of like, by paying attention and considering, otherwise people will say, oh, you're just sticking your head in the sand. And I fucking hate that shit. I mean, one, no. Two, what constitutes not sticking your head in the sand? Are you saying that I have to read all of his tweets and I have to watch Fox News every day and see what Hannity is saying or what Tucker Carlson? Like, I have to stay on top of all that stuff, No. And no one can define for anyone else, right? There's nothing about my approach that says that other people. It's just about mental health for yourself and also doing something, right? Everyone needs to do something. Everyone, if they have the capacity. Now, there are people that are going through cancer treatment and they have 3 kids and their marriage is falling apart. Do I expect that person to be an activist? No. I expect that person to completely ignore what's going on in the news and focus on what they need to focus on, because a lot of this is privilege, right? I have the privilege and the space and the health and the time to even pay attention to it at all. And so, it's all of that. But I was just rambling off the top of my head, so God knows if I'll agree with this in a couple years. So I just want to say that. All right, let's do a couple more questions to clean our fucking palate from this nastiness. All right, this next question from Mel from Melbourne. She says, how do you balance getting involved in family drama and letting it pass by you? I.e., how do you know when you should and shouldn't get involved? End of question. Well, complicated question, good question. But for the sake of time, I'll just say that those aren't necessarily the only 2 options. Getting involved in the family drama versus letting it pass by you. There's a differentiated way of being involved, but not getting engulfed. And it's hard. This is classic triangulation, differentiation, Murray Bowen stuff. Listen to all my deep dives on that, I guess. But in a nutshell, it's about love and not allowing the tension to be absorbed by you. If it's family drama, typically we're referring to things that aren't really involving us, critically. And so to be differentiated means that you can watch other people have tension and be close and with them, but not absorb it and not feel responsible and not get and not get anxious so that you have to fix it for your sake, and all that is triangulation work, detriangulation work, and differentiation work. And so that's my answer to that question. Let's do a couple more. All right, let's end with this question. I really like it. Patron Tony says, I'm not sure if this is the right kind of question for this occasion, but I'll give it a try. I recently started volunteering with the Lifeline, just chiming in here. So I think that might be like a crisis line going on. And I'm wondering, how can I improve my listening skills, not only with callers in great distress, but also with friends and family? How can I ask better questions that help me understand them more deeply and maybe even help them recognize unexplored feelings? I'd really appreciate any thoughts or advice. Yeah. End of question. Yeah, it's a great question. And it really depends on the role that you have, right? Take it from me as a not, I was like this even before I thought of being a therapist. I've always wanted to have deep conversations with people, and I've always been curious about what's going on with people, both as just a curiosity, but also, and just fun conversations, but also it's a way of getting closer. And take it from me that you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. Meaning that you can ask friends and family, you can do everything perfectly, and some people just aren't up for it, or they're anxious, or they don't want to share that with you, or whatever. So you can't evaluate your skill or your success based on outcome. You can only do what you can do. And there's that. Even on the lifeline, right? So I would release yourself from this notion, and I don't know if you have this notion, but there are notions online that if you play your cards right, you say the right thing, or you move your eyes in the right way, or I don't know, just so stupid, then you'll be able to extract anything from anyone. That's ridiculous. But I think what you're asking is, so you're asking, how can I improve my listening skills? What sort of questions? How can I help people feel safer or more motivated to share things? And it's a very good question, and it's very complicated. It's the art of being a therapist. When we train therapists, we do train them on communication skills and listening skills and the sort of questions that you can ask. But when I have trained therapists, I find that people have talent for this. That is before they even enter graduate school. And people can develop talent for this. But here are some principles. One is that you have to relax. People don't like to talk or open up to tense people. So if you're eager to get information, that doesn't help. So taking a deep breath, relaxing, talking slower is an outcome of that. Being relaxed with your body, lots of eye contact, not interjecting, not diverting the conversation away from the topic. Someone says, "Oh, I'm just having this really hard week." A common thing that people might do is say, "Oh, me too. Let me tell you about myself," or whatever, which isn't a bad thing. But if you want to draw people out, then that's not going to help. But here's the other thing: it can help. For some people, you might intuit, like I do sometimes, that they aren't sure if they want to go there. And if I lead the way genuinely, then they will go there, right? So sometimes it is a good listening skill to talk about yourself. This is the art form of therapy, because you're not going to find that in a book typically, that in order to be a good listener, you have to be narcissistically talking about your own life. But sometimes that is true. It is a way of helping people feel safer to talk. And it is a way for helping people to feel normal about what they're going through, or just setting the stage, like, okay, because if I say something self-disclosing, like to a friend or even a client, then it sort of sets the ground rules. Oh, okay. So he's establishing that the conversation can involve that topic. That can have a very inviting effect, right? Or just a reciprocation effect, like, oh, okay, well, if he's going to say that, then I guess I'll reciprocate by talking about my own anxieties or something like that. So there's that. But, generally speaking, eye contact. Another thing, if you want to have people go deeper, there's two styles of questions that I teach. One is phenomenological questions, which is the Carl Rogers things, which is way more complicated than people think it is. It's a whole philosophy and mindset that is really hard to hold on to, that has to do with foregoing all of your assumptions that you know what anyone else is saying. So when someone talks about their bad week or something, and because we don't have the time to investigate these things, we have to assume that we can guess as to what exactly they're getting at, right? Because we're just using words and linguistics and grammar and tone of voice to communicate. and we're trying to download ideas and concepts and experiences into the other person. And a lot of the time it's being interpreted incorrectly or communicated weirdly. And so there's a lot that's not really being downloaded to the other person. So what phenomenology does is it recognizes that and recognizes that everyone has different experiences, different subjective experiences, and to reduce those very complicated experiences linguistically, to words, and to have the other person interpret that set of words is ignoring the fact that often we're not really understanding what other people are saying. So you have to appreciate that, and that will guide the sort of questions that you ask. What do you mean by X? Or when you said that, like, tell me more about what does it feel like to be that? And so that can absolutely help people go deeper. The other thing is you want to capitalize on moments that people are hinting at going deeper. Or you want to highlight things about what they're saying that could help them go deeper. This is a very therapist-y thing to do. But, if someone was, I don't know if this track is going to work out. This is me laying the tracks out before myself. Anyway, someone, a friend is saying, oh, my week, yeah, it's been kind of complicated this week. Work has been kind of tough. So there's a lot of different ways to respond to that, but one of the ways that could help someone go deeper is you just say, oh, like, what do you mean tough? And then your friend's like, oh, it's just been kind of busy, and it's been kind of stressful. I don't know. It's just, I have a boss that's breathing down my neck. And then if it's hard to role play this, but I'll give it a shot. So what would I say to that? I guess I might say something like, I might self-disclose. If it was a friend, I might say like, oh yeah, God, I hated it when I had a boss breathing down my neck. Okay. So as I'm saying that, I'm kind of empathizing, right? I don't know if this is what their experience is, but I'm, making conversation, but I'm also potentially helping the other person to have permission for themselves even to recognize that, yeah, because, a lot of people will feel the sort of topic sentence of the experience. It's like, oh yeah, my boss is on my ass about something. But there's a whole body to that paragraph, right? Of just like, oh, it's so aggravating and so worrisome and so disrespectful to me, and it's micromanaging, and there's like intimidation and threat from my boss that scares me, and I hate that feeling. I hate being underneath someone's thumb. It's like claustrophobic. Okay, so whatever it is, right? That's the body to the paragraph, and if I lead the way, then maybe people that I'm talking to will follow. Now, I'll say that with friends and family, I don't typically do this because I just resort to my normal way of talking, In fact, I had a recent conversation with people, and I don't know how the topic came up, but basically the consensus was among these people that I know really well. I can't even remember who they were. Was it friends or family? I can't remember. But I remember them saying that I'm not like a therapist. I don't act like an annoying therapist in my personal life, that I have natural conversations and I'm not trying to manipulate people to talk about their feelings, But as I said before, I have a natural curiosity that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I'm a therapist. And so that just flows out naturally. Anyway, I'm rambling. I think I answered the question, and that does it for that episode. Tune in next time when I continue answering these questions. I feel like I got a good way into it. How far did I get into this, though? Oh my goodness, this might be a little sad. Oh no, maybe let's see. I got to line 45 out of about 145. So maybe one more episode. We'll see. All right, take care of yourself, please. Truly, because you deserve it. You really, really do.